Hello, and welcome to the Indiewood Podcast, a podcast about independent film and the many hats filmmakers have to wear in order to get those films made. Every month, I am joined by a different filmmaker, a different creative, and we talk about their approach to the creative process and how they thrive within the visual medium of film. And this month, I'm joined by an extra special guest, my former professor at UCLA, a brilliant writer, a wonderful director, and producer, George Huang.
Hey,
welcome
good to be back, Aaron.
Yeah, welcome back for next week. Next week's
yeah,
episode.
exactly. I see you still are wearing the
same pants, the same shirt.
Clothes. You really just okay. No. Look, I mean, it's smart. You always, David Lynch famously has the closet of the same one outfit. Yeah, exactly. The one suit, and he doesn't have to spend any of his time thinking about what he wants. I remember I had a meeting with Brian Grazer once, and he said, I can tell if someone's a creative just by how they're dressed.
Really?
And I'm staring at him and go, okay, well, what do you think of me? And he did not answer.
Well, here's a question. How do you think they do that in like reality TV? Like for example,
right.
Great British Bake Off.
Uh-huh.
They always wear the same thing.
Yeah.
But they're not shooting everything in the same day.
No, of course not. No. You have multiples. Yeah. No. It's just like, every costume department has like 3 or 4 of the same outfit.
Thing.
Yeah.
Do they like launder it every day?
It depends on your budget,
okay.
So either like, is it cheaper and given your production schedule, is it cheaper to have, a wardrobe person go and dry clean and launder everything and have it ready the next morning, which means they're probably going to be working through the night? Or is it better just get like 4 or 5, ready to go, and everyone gets a new version of the outfit every single day. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Well, speaking of production, because you mentioned something last episode that really stuck with me, where your second film was supposed to be shot for $10 million,
right?
And you came in under.
Right.
By 4, so you shot it for 6, and then Warner Brothers came in and was like, "Hey, our accountants are never wrong. you don't have a film, apparently, because you didn't spend all the money."
Right.
But I'm thinking about how that approach, or like how that scenario would have played out now in 2025, where I think a studio would be like, "Oh, you saved us $4 million. You saved almost 50% of the budget. Thank you. Please come again."
Right.
So I wanted to talk about your perspective and everything you've seen from a production standpoint,
right?
How things have changed from like your first film, Swimming with the Sharks, to now with your most recent film, Weekend in Taipei, that you shot in 23. 24.
Summer of 23.
And it was released in 24.
It was released in 24. Yep.
So what's the most jarring thing you've seen besides the idea that, you saved money and now they're kicking you out?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, look, for me, the biggest draw of film has always been it's this unique relationship between art and commerce, and you get to sort of scratch both sides. And I was like, oh, okay, I ended up, sort of like studying business and economics, but I also, I consider myself a writer and a storyteller. So, being able to marry both of those worlds is just continually fascinating to me. Now, when I started out, making movies in the 90s, I mean, the studios were their own entities. Yeah, they were, slowly they got absorbed by like, Sony or, Gulf and Western, Coca-Cola, that type of stuff. But they were pretty much left alone, and the studios all had personalities. They had people running it who cared deeply about movies, had, they were well-read, well-watched on movies. And, most importantly, they had pride in making movies. They wanted to be able to brag to the world, I made this year's Oscar winner. There was a certain amount of ownership there. I mean, in Uline back in the day, they would force their executives to take producer credits on all the movies that they sort of supervised, which I thought was wonderful because, the executives have to take ownership. Yeah, if it's a flop, then your name is stuck on it for life. So it's kind of motivates everyone to sort of like work just a little harder, But, in the past decade, we've seen these studios sort of been, sort of gobbled up, by sort of larger business interests. Like we saw Universal, get bought by, GE. And I remember Donna Langley, who was the president of production at the time, she's now chairman of Universal. I think one of the Fast movies had, I think it was 5 or 6, had done enormous. It was the best year ever for Universal. And, she went to, sort of her bosses at GE and said, we have had the most successful year ever in Universal history. Here's why, And her bosses were unimpressed. He said, we made more in airplane parts.
Yeah.
And so when you're part, when the studios are just a tiny subsidiary of a larger company, and the larger company is just caring about the bottom line, they are more interested in sort of like budgets and just throwing content out there without any sort of pride in what they're making. They're not really keeping an eye on, okay, well, we want this movie to be the biggest event. We want this to be something that, everyone's going to talk about, that we can brag about to our friends. No, I think a lot of the studios now are just like, okay, we just need to fill a certain amount of content and a certain slate, and let's just get it out there as quickly and as cheaply as we possibly can. And so,
do you feel like that's a remnant of that, big corporate, all those big corporate mergers where you had like corporate America come in with like, oh, we know what to do. We're middle management.
Exactly.
Middle management.
Exactly. Yeah. No. It's funny because you've seen a lot of that happen. Like AT&T when they bought Warner Brothers, they thought, okay, well, we can. It's like, no, you can't. No. And then David Zaslav from Discovery says, well, I can. It's like, no, you can't either. Yeah. It is a completely. There's business and there's show business. Even now, as I'm like, as I try to raise independent financing for movies, and and we're getting financing from really high net worth individuals, people who've had success in other parts of life, and they want to sort of apply what they've learned. I get it from their business practices, but you have to explain to them like, okay, that's manufacturing, or that's real estate, or that's tech. This is show business. It's a different beast. They don't understand the accounting, the money, why the money matters or why the money doesn't matter, sometimes. And, it's just a different business altogether.
Because you can take the same script.
Yep.
I wouldn't say the same crew and maybe, let's say even the same director, right? At different points in their life. Same cinematographer at different points in their life. Given the same budget, same script, same movie, same locations, and you're going to get 3 different movies.
Exactly.
Depending on their mood, where they are in the career, a gazillion different variables.
No, it can be, a completely different iteration of it. And, look, I mean, again, coming from the business background, like part of my frustration, when I first started out directing was always like, oh my God, nothing is happening as planned. It's like, oh God, we're over schedule, we're over, but and that would freak me out. But then, as I got more sort of, experience, you learn to sort of lean into that. It's what Robert Rodriguez calls the happy accidents. Stuff that you couldn't have planned for. Sometimes is 100% better than what you could have planned for. Like I remember, so I cast Benicio Del Toro in my first movie, as sort of the outgoing assistant, and I thought he's gonna like based on the stuff I'd seen of him previously, he's gonna be this really intense guy who's gonna like
post Usual Suspects or pre
Usual Suspects, and so he was excited to do it. He read the script, great. Because it was so busy just trying to hold the production together, we didn't really get much time to rehearse. And so he shows up the first day, and in my mind, it's going to be the Glenn Ross speech where Alec Baldwin comes in and lays down the law and then leaves. It's like it's going to be this is going to be fantastic. He starts doing the Fenster voice from Usual Suspects. He had been working with the dialect coach that I did not know about for 2 months, and he goes in. He just starts going, and everyone's like behind the camera, what? What is going on? It's like, I'm going, Benicio, you have to explain. You're laying out the entire exposition, the entire setup for the whole movie. You're mumbling. It's like, so and you already, and I felt for it because he'd spent 2 months working on this. Look, I mean, all credit to Bryan Singer and Christopher McQuarrie. They saw it like, oh, that's great, we're gonna use it, and they got Oscars out of him. Me, I was going, you're ruining my movie, right? But and for and we went back and forth. We finally, got to an understanding. It's like, what is the one thing this character is about? Okay, he's indifferent. He doesn't care. Fine. Okay, we all agree on that. Okay, give me that version. And so the version is, what ended up on film, but it was not my original vision. And even when I was in the editing room, I'm going, oh, I don't want to do this scene. I just try to cut it down to as short as it could possibly be. But then people would stop by the editing room and they go, oh my God, who's this guy? He's hilarious. I'm going, what are you talking about? It's like, come on, this is fun. This is gold. And I didn't realize it because I'd been so locked in on what my original vision. Again, I want to be Alec Baldwin from Glengarry Glen Ross. I even told Benicio that, and he said to me, rightfully so, then go hire Alec Baldwin. I was like, shit, okay, you can't win these arguments, right? So, But again, it was a nice, happy accident. Once Benicio and I found a common mutual understanding of what the character should be, he gave that performance. It turned out to be hilarious. People really embraced it. He ended up winning the IFP, the Independent Film Project Award for Best Supporting Actor that year.
That's
and it was something that I hated and completely rejected at the time. So you just never know. And so, as I've gotten older, on more experience, you sort of you learn to embrace those sort of weird sort of things that sort of happen on set and get thrown your way.
The way I see it is sometimes a movie wants to be something on its own. Like it has a life of its own.
Exactly.
You birthed it, it's living, breathing. And you have to listen to that on some level. Because it can take you into wonderful places.
Exactly.
I shot a film for a friend and I was editing it.
Okay.
It was a short film.
Yeah.
And they had a whole 2-minute segment in the end with just, everything was wrapped up beautifully.
Right.
There's stuff that's happening and we were editing and it just didn't quite fit. And so I just cut 2 minutes off the end. And I was like, "That's your film," and that's the film they went to festivals with just 2 minutes gone,
right?
Because that point where it ended had so much more weight to it, and the film wanted to end there instead of going for another 2-3 minutes.
No.
So I thought that was really cool.
Well, but it does take a lot of experience, because when you're young and starting out, you're like, no, that's my vision. It's my vision, and you want to, this is the movie I've seen in my head over and over, and it's hard to sort of hear what the film gods are telling you sometimes. The universe is saying, no, cut it here.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I had this conversation the other day where I was giving notes to somebody, and I was like, what's the difference between giving a good note,
right,
and then giving a bad note? Because sometimes I hear people giving bad notes, and I came to this conclusion that it's at some point you just you stop caring. I think maybe that's not the right word, but you just that the idea is I don't have time. I don't have time to give you my ego version of this. I'm just going to give you the straight note,
right?
Because sometimes I think early on in people's careers, they're giving notes because they want to see their version of the film,
right?
Their version of the script,
exactly.
And at some point, when you get some experience, get some more confidence, let go of that pride a little bit, you stop thinking like that. You're like, I don't care about my version of this movie.
Right.
I just want to help you because I want to do my own thing.
Right.
I have things to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then you give, I think, better notes.
Yeah,
and I think that also kind of connects with this idea of you get to a certain point in your career, you kind of let go of what you want,
right,
and then you let the creative flow kind of guide you where it needs to go.
But look, I mean, in it's for people receiving notes and sort of the creative events, it's always hard to take notes.
Yeah,
it is hard because you don't want to hear the bad news, and sometimes I know my immediate reaction is always, fuck you, you don't know what you're talking about, but then you let it sit for 24 or 48 hours and just going, okay, they have a point. Yeah, you gotta let me go back and take a look at it. I just attended a test screening of Luc Besson's Dracula, and I gave him notes, and he got so angry. And I'm going, Luke, you asked me for notes. I'm giving you notes. I'm just giving you 3 notes. Okay, I think you need to do this. This didn't work for me, and I didn't like the music. That's it. And he was so upset about it for 2 months. I'm going, Luke, you've been doing this for 50 years, seriously. But these are babies. It's hard for us sometimes to say,
invested.
We're all emotionally invested. But the experienced ones know, Luke has finally called me back after 2 months, oh,
you're right.
Okay, you're right. I changed this. I tried to cut this down. But that's sort of that initial. It's you sort of clinch up, and everyone. It's hard to hear it. You want to, that's why, I don't know if you noticed this at workshop at UCLA and the classes, but, when we give notes, it's always, in a compliment sandwich is what we call it. It's I really like what you did with this scene, and it's really engaging, but, maybe however, it was a great read. We always
massage it a little
exactly,
bit. So it goes down easily.
Exactly. But then, I'm looking at the clock, is we don't have enough time for it.
I feel like we were always running late to give notes.
Exactly.
I feel like if you cut off the compliment part,
exactly,
it would be go.
Yeah.
But I feel like though that idea of adding a compliment at the end or the beginning and then the note, kind of the critical note in the middle, opens up
receptiveness.
Yeah,
no, it does.
I'm trying to think of like a cooking analogy where you like
Mm-hmm.
saute the food so it opens up and then you can salt it.
Blooms the herbs and spices.
Yeah, and so then you can kind of really make the notes stick.
Yeah,
because so people aren't defensive.
right.
Well, I wanted to kind of continue a little bit more
Yeah.
about your perspective on how things have evolved.
Yeah,
from a production standpoint, specifically
Yeah.
for independent film.
Yep.
From this first several films to like now,
Right.
how has production changed? How has financing changed?
Yeah.
How is getting a film off the ground, like off the page, into production? And then I think like later on we'll kind of touch on distribution and exhibition, because that's changed as well.
Yeah, no, it definitely has. I mean, it's interesting because it feels like now I've been doing this like 35 years. 35 years later, I'm having to go back to my very first film swimming sharks of like day one, just trying to, you got to go out and get the finance yourself. You got to package this yourself. You got to, just go do everything on your own. I mean, back in the 90s and even like, through the aughts and stuff, like if I went to a studio and said, oh, okay, I've got this really good script normally, or sometimes, oh my God, and I feel bad for all of you coming out of like, we used to be able to just scribble ideas on a cocktail napkin and sell it, like 2 sentences, what if Arnold Schwarzenegger was a witness protection aid? Done. We bought it. It's
Arnold
like, what?
Schwarzenegger is a cop and teaching kindergarten.
Exactly. Done. Bought it. Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's like, don't you want to see? Nope. We'll give you $1 million. Like, shit. All right. Yeah. Now, not only do you have to have a full script, you have to have all the stars and director attached and half the financing before you even go to a studio. And at that point, it's just like, I'm just going to go make this myself. Why do I need you?
I'll just keep half the financing and go do it.
Exactly.
For half the price.
Exactly. So it's almost like, for the filmmakers who are serious about film and want to, just go do it, you can, there are ways to sort of construct this model and just get out there and make your movie.
Well, just to also add, technology's changed so much.
Oh yeah, no, exactly.
And when you were shooting,
on film,
independent film on film
on 35, it's so expensive.
That money alone that you spent on film could just be a film now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no. I mean, for Weekend in Taipei, we shot a lot of stuff on the iPhone. I mean, the new Danny Boyle film out right now, 28 years later, y'all shot it on an iPhone. I mean, the technology
also shot on 28 phones.
Yeah, exactly. 28 phones. But still, $28,000 for 28 iPhones is still a bargain compared to, okay, I got to get 1 million feet of film. Oh my God. It's like, and I got to process it, and they got to video transfer it, and they got to color correct. Yeah. It's just like, oh my God, I mean, I don't look, yes. I mean, I hear like, what Quentin Tarantino and Christopher Nolan, while they love film, and film definitely has an organic look to it, versus digital, it is kind of a luxury. And, for those of us who aren't Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan, we have to be a little more scrappy and be a little more entrepreneurial about how we tackle these things. And that's where I think, for me, the business is circled back as a filmmaker. I have to get back in that independent, let's go raise some money ourselves. Let's go find, the actors ourselves.
Who's got an apartment? Who's got a car?
Exactly. What locations do we have? It's sort of the same thing like Robert did for our mariachi. Just bring out a blank page. What do we have? We got a bus. We got a dog. We got a guitar case. What's the movie around that? And so that's what we've circled back to in this modern age. Yeah. Again, the good news is with the technology and, the resources that are available to us now, a lot of stuff, that would have cost a fortune in time, and resources, you can do now on your home computer or on your phone, and I tell a lot of our students at UCLA that, because they're, I want to get hired to write something. It's like, or I want to get hired to be in a writer's room. It's like, Robert has been doing like sort of this talking tour because he's got like a whole new financing model. But the attitude he has is like, and he told me this too, is like, if you're going to wait for somebody to give you permission to make your movie, you're going to be waiting a long, long time.
I keep saying this, and it kind of sounds mean, and I think maybe I'll change the language like down the road. But it's nobody cares until they care,
right?
And so like, how do you make them care?
Right.
And the answer is however you can, or however you want,
exactly.
Or however you can find like the path to, because like my wife was in a show
Mm-hmm.
and we decided to do some PR.
Okay.
And then we were also I was also talking to a lot of like filmmakers who
Mm-hmm.
had PR, who were at Sundance and doing festivals.
Mm.
And they were like, everybody's trying to make everybody care.
Right.
But people aren't going to care until they care.
Right.
And it's weird, like catch-22, where
Mm-hmm.
in order to grab somebody's attention so they can help you, you're going to have to do a lot and like make them care and want to help you.
Right.
But in order to do that, you're going to have to get their help. It's this weird, like,
No, it's a weird catch-22.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is. No, we experienced that with the weekend in Taipei because, the theatrical experience is hard, to make a dent in that, and especially marketing. I mean, it's just like, So, we went with the distributor, Ketchup Entertainment, a small upstart. They did not have, the money to spend for marketing, so a lot of it had to be grassroots, and so we'd reach out, especially to sort of the Asian American community to get them to try to rally behind the film. And so we'd hold screenings, I'd have to do a lot of, sort of host a lot of screenings. And the response we got was great, but at the end of the day, it still didn't, it's hard to make a dent, in sort of, we're all bombarded every day with, like information and stuff. So it's hard
Everyone's
to
trying to sell you something,
cut through all of that. The noise.
Here's a question. Do you think taking a film on tour is a good strategy?
I think it is if you offer something unique about the live experience of that. Like, Kevin Smith is great at that. Like, he is taking Dogma out on a live tour now, where he will speak at it afterwards. And and Kevin is like, he's just, he can go on for 4 hours on a stage and just like, and wax extemporaneously about any topic. And he's so massively entertaining. So there's something about the live experience of like, we're going to show you a movie, but then Kevin is going to like talk afterwards and do a live Q&A. That's great. Adam Green, who did the Hatchet movies, used to do that with his horror movies. And those are like, smaller, lower tier, horror films, but, it still gets an audience because there's something unique about the live experience. But, just four-walling a movie on your own from theater to theater, I think most people would rather, we've all been conditioned now, especially after pandemics, like, we'll just wait and watch it at home. In the comfort of, convenience of our own home. We've all gotten lazy that way.
I see that, like adding some sort of other, layer to that experience.
Exactly. Something you can only get, from going out to the theater to experience that.
I see that. Okay.
All
right.
But it's all come to, hustle, and, there are a lot of hustles out there, and like, in terms of financing, I'm getting introduced to like weird sort of like financial instruments. I was telling you the other day, like, there's something called the 181 Fund.
Okay.
So there are people out there. So George Bush, when he's president, signed into law that movies can take their full depreciation of an asset in the first year.
Okay.
So for people who don't know, and I didn't know this until I went to business school, but depreciation is like when you buy a house, the house just loses value over time. And so usually,
or a car, for example.
Or a car, exactly.
Like you drive off the lot, it's like you lose $10,000.
You lose 10,000, so that's depreciation. So, but usually it's spaced out over 15, 20, 30 years, so your house, every year when you do taxes, they'll say, okay, we're going to take $7,000 off the value of the house in depreciation. So you can write that off on your taxes. George Bush said, well, for movies, you can write it all off in the first year. So, if you spend $10 million in a movie, you can report a tax depreciation of $10 million, which is a nice loss to report, for someone. So there are funds that will actually gather, these sort of like, movie budgets and sell off the depreciation to, high net tax people who need that write-off. And so they'll say, okay, well, Yarrow,
that's brilliant.
It is actually. So for $1 million, we'll give you $750,000 or $800,000 for your $1 million of depreciation. We'll buy it off you so we can go sell it somewhere else.
Is that specifically in the States, or sorry,
in the United States? Specifically in the United States. It's only in the United States. So, and like even I was going, that seems like you would get audited. And, a lot of these funds go, we have been audited. We've been audited 15 times, but we've beaten it every single time. It is a law. So
I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, let's end the pod early. I got to go.
Right. Exactly. So there are all these sort of like weird financial instruments that you can engage in order to make movies. I just recommended to one of our student, she's from Oklahoma and she's part of an Indian tribe. there is a national Indian grant. No questions asked. Is like, yeah, if you are part of a tribe, we will give you money as part of reparations for whether it's a small business, whether it's a movie, a record album, whatever. We will just give you a grant.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and you just have to apply for it. And yeah, even some of the bigger banks like Comerica and working in the street, they're aware of this grant, and they will if you would get a grant approved, we will give you the money.
There is a lot of money out there, especially for the arts. I know, like when we think about film in Europe, it's like, oh, it's subsidized,
right?
But here it's not.
No.
But it kind of is just the legwork you have to do.
Exactly.
And the hoops you have to jump through.
A lot of hoops.
It's more work than actually making the film on some level.
Yeah.
But I think it's also beneficial to filmmakers to really kind of dig deep into those, like funding pools. I don't know, maybe in 2025, maybe not so much, but like there's money.
No.
It's been earmarked years ago.
Exactly.
Go find it.
No. I mean, the new David Fincher, Brad Pitt, Quentin Tarantino movie just got a $20 million California state tax incentive, to go make the movie here in California. So
which is incredible.
So it's out there. The tough thing, I mean, I know Gavin Newsom's been trying to pass that $750 million, incentive, but it's politically it's a hard look. For the rest, for a lot of like taxpayers and voters, is like, they see movies as, it's like they're movie stars, they're driving around in luxury vehicles and living in like nice Hollywood Hills houses. Why am I subsidizing their lifestyle? And,
but it's the community of filmmakers who are crewing, who are
exactly. No, there's a whole middle class of just regular blue collar workers, and they're artists in their own right too, who are just trying to make a living, making movies. And look, Hollywood, Los Angeles, it's the media capital of the world. It really is, and it's part of our identity in the city. And hopefully, we can stop some of the runaway production, of course I'm saying this, so I'm trying to convince people that, hey, come work in Taiwan and film stuff. We'll finance it. It's hard because, I mean, Hollywood has always meant something, at least to me. And now it's like, okay, most films these days, like shot in Bulgaria, Budapest, like other places that are just cheaper. Atlanta, New Mexico. Yeah, there's so many competing, incentives that it's just like, well, I mean, as a filmmaker, you just want to get it made. You just want to get it done. So, you'll take whatever help you can get. And if that means, okay, we're going to Georgia to do this, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. I do want to say though that still, maybe it's changing, maybe it will change soon, or at least down the road a couple of years. The craftspeople in Los Angeles are just on a different level.
They are. Oh my God. It's so good.
It's like theater.
Yep.
I was watching theater in Los Angeles and I was like, oh, this is a good show.
Right.
And then I had a touring company come from New York, like the Broadway show.
The original cast.
And I saw it. So just a more background, we saw Sunday in a Park with George in Los Angeles, like a local regional theater. I was like, this is great. Wonderful show. Loved it.
Right.
Then we saw Old Friends come in. It was the Broadway show. Bernadette Peters was in it. Like all these icons of, the stage from New York. And they did a segment from Sunday in a Park with George.
I know.
It was just next level. It was transcendent. I was like, okay, that's how people work in Los Angeles versus somewhere else.
Yeah. No. When I shot Trojan War, my second movie that sort of, landed me in jail, I had the great privilege of working with Dean Semler and his camera crew and his grips and stuff. It was like working with SEAL Team 6. They were on. I mean, it's just like, okay, so we only have like 6 hours effective shooting time because they're shooting summer nights. So they're like, don't worry about it. Yeah. They were on walkies. They would anticipate things 3 moves ahead of what I was thinking, and they'd have everything ready. It's like, like the actors are even like, okay, well, we're turning around. That means, we're flipping the whole set. And they'd start to walk off to the trailers, and Dean Summer's like, okay, we're ready.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Like literally just turn around.
Right. It was like, what? What do you mean you're ready? It's a nighttime show. Like, we're ready.
We're ready.
Whereas, like, I remember I had to do a pilot in Montreal, and again, you want to do it for the Canadian tax incentives and stuff. But, this is at a time when Montreal was, they were offering these generous incentives because they're trying to build up the industry. So if you did not get the A-list crew, oh God. So the A-list crew was shooting The Bone Collector, the Angelina Jolie film at the time. And literally, I was like, oh my God. Yes, they gave us 50% back. So it only cost half as much, but it ended up we went over budget because it took us 3 times as long to just get a shot. I mean, here, like the dolly grips, they measure everything out. It's like military precision. They're watching, they understand the story. They know to go with it. in Montreal, the dolly grip was like stoned out of his mind and like, just like miss him like completely out of frame. And you go, what's happening here? It's like, well, you got to tell me what speed you want. It's like, just follow. Oh my God.
Yeah, just
exactly. Just follow. That's your job. Literally, we had to bring out a metronome and just count off for the actor and the dolly grip to be and saying, okay, 1, 2. And this is a simple walking shot. It's like, oh.
A friend of mine shot a film, a student film for, I believe, AFI.
Okay.
And they were like, oh, I want to shoot Super 16. They had money. And they hired somebody to shoot. And this was a couple years ago. So this was like, not in the film days. And he goes, cool, I can like focus by eye. I don't need a measure. 90% of the shots were out of focus. Boy. And this is on film.
Boy, I know.
So
there's no fixing that. No. My God.
They can't reshoot because they spent like 20 grand on film. It was brutal.
I know. No. So that is sort of, again, the buyer beware. I always tell producers, like, it's stepping over dollars to become dimes. I get it. Some of these incentives are really attractive, but you really got to vet out the crew. You got to find people who know what they're doing. And especially if you're going overseas, the language
is very different.
There is always a translation problem, and just the resources just aren't there. I remember I was visiting a friend in Prague when they're shooting Blade 2, and get the blue look, that Guillermo del Toro wanted for, the vampires and, the overall look of the film. Normally you would just put blue gel over the lights, here, if you're here in Hollywood. They didn't have that. So they basically raided all these tanning salons and got the blue UV light. Yeah. People started dropping and fainting on set from sun poisoning. It was insane. So there's stuff like that goes on. I mean, even, with my movie in Taipei, even though, look, my Mandarin's not great, but you think, okay, English, like, said, okay, bring me an apple box. All of us in the industry, they brought us a box of apples. I'm going, okay, we're gonna have to.
I was gonna say, like, even now, things should be more like, film is global. People should know the language more.
Right.
People should know the techniques and kind of be on the same page. But you're still finding pockets of like,
there's still people. This is a great thing about movies. People love movies. They all want to be a part of it. This is why every country in the world wants to offer incentives. They want to train crew members. They recognize the soft power that movies have, all around the world, but again, there's still very nascent, sort of infrastructure there. They still don't, just getting permits, while here, like LA, can just walk into an office, and 20 minutes later, if I got my permit, I just remember in Taipei, oh my God, it took months. And, and I remember like, so, because it rains a lot there. And so like, okay, we weren't able to shoot on the Monday, so we got to move it to Thursday. Can we change a permit? And they didn't understand that. They said,
no,
wait, we gave you a permit already. It's like, yeah, but it was raining, so we got to move it. We gave you a permit and you didn't use it. It's like, look, I don't want to offend you, and I know you worked hard on it, but it rained. There's nothing we can do. We got to move it to Thursday. It's like they were not very flexible with that. Yeah. So it became hard. Yeah. So, it's, again, stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. But, again, if this is what the film gods throw at you, how can you adapt? How can you make something
Sometimes
different?
That's the only way you can make a movie.
Exactly.
Get that incentive and people feel that support.
Exactly.
Well, I wanted to kind of maybe dig a bit deeper into the craft side of things, less for production.
Yeah.
But I think we'll save that for the next episode,
okay.
episode 3.
All right.
And for now, we'll wrap things up and thank everyone for listening. George, thank you for coming on the pod.
No problem.
And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. All right.
Thank you for listening to the Anywood Podcast. You can find us anywhere you find your podcasts or on YouTube on the Cinematography for Actors YouTube channel. See you next week.
From the CFA Network, Cinematography for Actors is bridging the gap through education and community building. Find out about us and listen to our other podcast at cinematographyforactors.com. Cinematography for Actors Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit. For more information on fiscal sponsorship, donations, because we're tax exempt now, so it's a tax write-off, and upcoming education, you can email us at contact@cinematographyforactors.com. Thanks.